The package arrived on a Tuesday. I'd never ordered anything online that I could remember, and yet there it was on my doorstep in downtown Seattle. Brown cardboard, my name printed in a font I didn't recognize, no return address. Inside was a book bound in leather that looked older than my grandfather's war medals. No note, no explanation. The title was embossed in gold, Fundamentals of Applied Metaphysical Engineering. I should have thrown it away, should have reported it to building security. Instead, I brought it inside and set it on my kitchen counter next to 3 days of unwashed dishes and a laptop running code that wouldn't compile. Senior software engineer at a mid-tier tech company, that was my life. Debugging other people's mistakes, attending meetings about meetings, microwaving dinners at 9 p.m. because I'd forgotten to eat again. The book sat there for a week before I opened it. When I finally did, on a Friday night after my 3rd beer, the first page had a single sentence handwritten in ink that seemed to shift colours as I looked at it. Magic is pattern recognition applied to reality's source code. I laughed. Someone's elaborate prank. Had to be. Probably Jason from QA getting revenge for that bug I'd assigned to him last month. But I kept reading. The second page outlined something called a reality compiler. The third described causal loops with the same precision my college textbooks had used for explaining algorithms. By page 15, I'd encountered diagrams that looked like circuit boards mixed with ancient runes, annotations in the margins discussing energy efficiency and throughput optimization. It read like a technical manual for magic. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was fiction, fantasy, someone's creative writing project accidentally delivered to the wrong address. But the engineer in me recognized something else. The internal consistency. The way each concept built on previous ones, the attention to edge cases and error handling. Whoever wrote this had thought it through with the same rigor I applied to system architecture. Page 47 contained the first practical exercise, a basic illumination spell described as converting ambient thermal energy into visible light spectrum through focused intention. The instructions were oddly specific. Visualization techniques, breathing patterns, hand gestures that reminded me of signing API calls. I tried it at 2 a.m., standing in my dark living room feeling like an absolute idiot. My hand started glowing. Not bright, just a soft blue luminescence. Like I dipped my fingers in bioluminescent algae. It lasted maybe 3 seconds before flickering out, leaving me standing there in the darkness with my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried again. Same result. The third attempt lasted 5 seconds. By sunrise, I could maintain the light for almost a minute, and I'd stopped questioning whether this was real. You don't hallucinate muscle fatigue. You don't imagine the smell of ozone or the way the air temperature drops slightly when you pull energy from it. Magic was real, and it worked like programming. The book called it thaumaturgy, but the underlying principles were hauntingly familiar. Input, processing, output, conditional logic, loops, and functions. Even the concept of mana was explained as a resource pool that regenerated based on your body's metabolic efficiency and environmental factors. I'd spent 15 years writing code. Turns out I'd been training for this without knowing it. Monday morning, I called in sick. Spent the day working through Chapter 3, which covered basic force manipulation. By Tuesday, I could move my coffee mug across the table without touching it. Wednesday introduced sensory augmentation and enhancing sight and hearing beyond normal human limits. That's when things got complicated. Enhanced hearing meant I could pick up conversations through walls. Not just my neighbours arguing about whose turn it was to take out the trash, but whispers from floors above and below, and what I heard made my blood run cold. 2 men in the apartment, directly above mine, discussing the target who received the primer. Talking about observation protocols and whether I'd demonstrated sufficient aptitude to warrant recruitment. I'd been set up. The book wasn't a mistake. Someone had sent it deliberately, and they'd been watching my progress. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. But the larger part, the part that had spent years optimizing database queries and debugging memory leaks, was already analyzing the situation. They wanted to recruit me. That meant I had value, leverage. It also meant magic wasn't some secret I'd stumbled onto. It was organized. There were others. The book's later chapters started making more sense. References to sanctioned practitioners and the Compact, warnings about unregistered thaumaturgic activity, and enforcement protocols. This wasn't just magic, it was a system, with rules, with structure, with people who enforced both. I kept reading, kept practicing, but now I was also listening. The men upstairs reported to someone they called the Arbiter. They mentioned emerging talents and the Seattle Node. Apparently, I wasn't the only person in the city who'd received a mysterious book recently. We were being evaluated, sorted, categorized based on our progress and aptitude. By the end of week 2, I could maintain 3 simultaneous spell effects, had memorized the first 50 fundamental patterns, and understood the basic theory behind reality manipulation well enough to start experimenting with my own variations. I'd also made a decision. If they wanted me in their system, they'd have to offer me something worth joining for. I wasn't going to be recruited. I was going to negotiate. The book had a contact protocol buried in Chapter 12. A ritual that would signal the observers that you were ready for formal evaluation. Most people probably completed it eagerly, thrilled to be invited into this hidden world. I spent 3 days preparing something different. Magic followed rules. Rules could be exploited. And if there was one thing 15 years of software engineering had taught me, it was how to find the gaps between what a system said it did and what it actually did. The night I performed the contact ritual, I added my own modifications. Small ones. Subtle changes to the energy signature that wouldn't be obvious unless someone was looking very carefully. I wasn't just announcing I was ready. I was showing them exactly what kind of mage they were dealing with. The response came at 3:47 a.m., 3 days after my modified ritual. Not through dreams or mystical visions, through my apartment's smoke detector. The plastic casing popped off with a pneumatic hiss I definitely hadn't triggered. A holographic projection materialized above it, showing a woman's face rendered in blue light. She looked maybe 40, with the kind of precise features that suggested either exceptional genetics or minor cosmetic alteration. Her expression was carefully neutral. "Marcus Webb, your signal was received, your modifications were noted." A pause that felt deliberately timed. Clever, embedding a competency demonstration within a contact protocol. Most initiates simply follow instructions. I'd positioned myself across the room, maintaining clear line of sight while staying out of easy reach. Old habit from too many corporate presentations where staying mobile meant staying in control. "Most initiates probably don't realize they're being tested," I replied. Her smile was brief, professional. "You've completed 6 chapters in 14 days. That's above average, but not unprecedented. What is unusual is your approach. You're treating magical theory like a programming language. Because it is one. Different syntax, same fundamental concept, input, process, output. The universe is just a really complicated compiler. That perspective will either make you very effective or get you killed." She leaned forward slightly. The projection's resolution was remarkable, capturing the texture of her jacket's fabric. "I'm Arbiter Chen. I manage practitioner recruitment for the Pacific Northwest node. We need to discuss your future. Assuming I want one with you. You performed a contact ritual. That suggests interest." I'd spent 3 days gaming out this conversation, anticipating responses, preparing contingencies, but there's a difference between theoretical planning and actual negotiation, and I needed information before committing to any position. "It suggests curiosity. I want to understand the system before deciding whether to participate." Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. Reassessment, maybe. "Most people are simply grateful to learn magic is real." Most people didn't spend the last 2 weeks being surveilled by operatives in their building. That got a reaction. Small, quickly controlled, but visible. You identified the observation team. Enhanced hearing has advantages. They weren't particularly quiet. She was quiet for several seconds, and I could practically see the calculations happening. How much to reveal, how much to withhold, how to position the offer to maximize my compliance while minimizing her organization's vulnerability. The compact has existed for approximately 400 years, she finally said. We regulate magical practice, maintain the veil that keeps our existence hidden from baseline humanity, and manage resources that would cause catastrophic disruption if their existence became public knowledge. And you recruit by leaving mysterious books in people's apartments. We identify individuals with latent thaumaturgic potential and provide them with controlled introduction to their capabilities. Most people never progress beyond basic techniques. A few like you demonstrate aptitude worth developing further. The projection flickered slightly, either a technical glitch or a deliberate tell, making her seem more human, more approachable. I suspected the latter. Here's what I'm offering, Chen continued. Full training at our Seattle facility. Access to resources and knowledge that will accelerate your development by years. A position within the Compact's operational structure with salary and benefits that will make your current employment look like an internship. In exchange for service, the Compact maintains order within the magical community. We need practitioners with both capability and judgment. Your background in systems analysis could be particularly valuable. It was a good pitch, well structured, hitting logical and emotional appeals without overselling. If I'd been anyone else, I might have accepted immediately. But I'd noticed something. A gap in her presentation, a detail conspicuously absent. What happens to people who refuse recruitment? The pause was longer this time. That depends on their subsequent actions. If they cease magical practice and maintain secrecy, nothing. We monitor them periodically, but don't interfere. And if they continue practicing independently, that's not permitted. Unregulated magical activity poses too many risks. There it was, the real structure underneath the professional courtesy. This wasn't an offer, it was an ultimatum with better packaging. So my options are join you, give up magic entirely, or become a target for your enforcement division. I'd phrase it more positively, but essentially, yes. The Compact exists because unrestricted magical practice led to catastrophic consequences in the past. We learned those lessons. We prevent their repetition. I believed her. The earnestness was genuine. The conviction real. She thought she was offering me something valuable while protecting the world from dangers I didn't yet understand. And maybe she was right. Maybe the system they'd built was necessary. But I'd seen what happened when you let someone else define the boundaries of your expertise. I'd worked for companies that claimed their processes were essential, their hierarchies justified, their restrictions protective. Usually they were just protecting their own power. I need to think about it. Chen shook her head. I'm authorized to give you 48 hours. After that, we need a decision. Either you join us, or we need to ensure you're not a threat. And how exactly would you do that? Her smile was sympathetic but firm. We have practitioners far more experienced than you, Mr. Webb, and resources you can't imagine. Please don't make this adversarial. We're offering you something remarkable. The projection vanished. My smoke detector's casing snapped back into place with the same pneumatic hiss. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, processing. 48 hours to decide whether to surrender my independence or go up against an organization that had 4 centuries of experience handling exactly this situation. The smart move was obvious. Accept their offer. Learn everything they'd teach me. Operate within their structure. I'd have training, resources, protection. All I'd lose was autonomy. Except autonomy was the whole point. I left my last job because I was tired of being a component in someone else's system. And now, weeks after discovering I had actual power, actual capability beyond what I'd ever imagined, I was supposed to immediately subordinate that to a new hierarchy. The book was still on my desk, open to Chapter 7. Advanced Pattern Manipulation. The techniques it described were elegant, efficient, refined by generations of practitioners, but they were also conservative, designed to work within established frameworks. What if the frameworks themselves were wrong? I opened my laptop and started documenting everything I'd learned. Not to share, to preserve, because if I was going to refuse the compact's offer, I needed insurance and leverage and a very good plan. 48 hours wasn't much time, but I debugged critical systems on tighter deadlines. I started with what I knew about their operational patterns. Chen had monitored me for 3 weeks before making contact. That suggested observation protocols, data collection requirements, probably approval chains before direct intervention. Organizations don't move that slowly unless they're bureaucratic, which meant they had weaknesses. I pulled up every interaction I'd logged with the dimensional rifts. Times, locations, energy signatures I'd managed to measure. The pattern was there if you looked closely. The rifts appeared in places where reality was already thin, where human activity had worn grooves into the fabric of space. Server farms with their electromagnetic fields, old buildings with decades of concentrated human emotion, transit hubs where millions of people pass through, each one unconsciously affecting probability around them. The compact probably had maps of these locations, monitoring stations, assigned practitioners. But maps could be wrong, monitoring could be circumvented, and I was very good at finding gaps in systems. My phone buzzed. Not Chen this time. A text from Marcus, my former co-worker. Heard you quit. Want to grab coffee and complain about management together? I almost ignored it, then stopped. Marcus worked in infrastructure now, maintaining the backbone systems that kept the city running. Power grids, telecommunications, traffic management, all the invisible networks that made modern life possible, all the systems that created electromagnetic interference patterns. I texted back, "Tomorrow morning, I'll buy." The next 12 hours disappeared into research and preparation. I documented every technique the book described, but more importantly, I documented every limitation it mentioned, every warning about what not to try, every boundary it established around acceptable practice, because boundaries existed for 2 reasons. Either they protected you from genuine danger, or they protected someone else's control over you. I needed to know which was which. The coffee shop Marcus chose was in the financial district, surrounded by buildings full of servers and trading systems. The electromagnetic noise was constant, a background hum that most people filtered out unconsciously. I'd learned to feel it now, the way it distorted the space around us. "You look different," Marcus said, studying me across the table. "More focused. Less like you're about to snap at the next pointless meeting." No more meetings to snap at. I stirred my coffee, watching the patterns form and dissolve. "How's the infrastructure side treating you?" He launched into complaints about legacy systems and political decisions that ignored technical reality. I listened with half my attention while the other half mapped the electromagnetic topology of the area. 3 major server farms within 6 blocks, fiber optic trunks running beneath the streets, cellular towers on every high-rise. Reality was thin here, very thin. "You're not really listening," Marcus said, but he was smiling. "What's actually going on with you?" I considered lying, considered deflecting, then decided that if I was going to challenge an organization with 4 centuries of experience, I needed allies who understood how systems actually worked. "How much do you know about electromagnetic interference and quantum probability?" His eyebrows rose. "That's a hell of a conversational pivot, enough to know they're related in ways most people don't think about." "Why?" I told him a version of the truth. Not about magic or dimensional rifts, but about patterns in electromagnetic fields that suggested underlying structures most monitoring systems missed. About gaps in the standard models that might be exploitable. He leaned forward, interested now. "You're talking about using EM interference to mask activity from detection systems. Something like that, hypothetically. Hypothetically, that would work better in some locations than others. Places with high ambient noise where additional signals would get lost in the background. He pulled out his tablet, started sketching. The financial district is perfect for it. So are industrial zones, anywhere with heavy machinery, medical districts with all their imaging equipment, even residential areas during peak usage hours. He was giving me exactly what I needed. A map of where I could work without the compact detecting me immediately. "This is for something illegal, isn't it?" Marcus said, but he was still sketching. "Or at least something someone with authority won't like?" "Probably both." "Good. I'm tired of people with authority making technical decisions they don't understand." He saved the sketch and sent it to my phone. "If you need real-time data on EM patterns, I can pull that. Part of my job is monitoring interference that affects infrastructure." "That would help." "Then consider it done. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Whatever you're actually doing, make sure it's worth the risk. I've seen too many people throw away stability for principles that didn't matter." I thought about the dimensional rift I'd sealed, the thing that had been trying to push through into our reality. The way the compact's standardized techniques would have left it partially open, managed rather than solved. It matters. We talked for another hour about nothing important. Then I left with a map of the city's electromagnetic topology and a source for real-time monitoring data. Not bad for a coffee meeting. Chen called at the 36-hour mark. "Just checking in. Have you had time to consider our offer?" "Still thinking." "Mr. Webb, I want to be clear about something. We're not your enemy. The restrictions we maintain exist because we've seen what happens without them. Practitioners who experiment recklessly. Dimensional breaches that couldn't be contained. Reality itself becoming unstable in localized areas. I believe you saw those things. I'm less convinced they happened because of reckless experimentation versus inadequate technique." Silence on the line, then carefully. "That's a dangerous perspective." "So is assuming your methods are the only valid ones. The council would like to speak with you directly tomorrow if you're willing. They can explain the full scope of what we do, what we've prevented. It might change your mind." Meeting the council meant walking into their stronghold, submitting to their authority even if I intended to refuse. But it also meant seeing their operation firsthand, understanding their capabilities and where and when. She gave me an address in the old city, the historical district where buildings dated back 2 centuries. 10 in the morning. Come alone. And Mr. Webb? Whatever you're planning, please reconsider. We've handled situations like this before. It never ends well for the independent practitioner. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up and looked at Marcus's map. The old city had some of the lowest electromagnetic interference in the metropolitan area. Historic preservation rules meant minimal modern infrastructure. They'd chosen the meeting location deliberately, somewhere their monitoring would be most effective, which meant I needed to be very careful about what I brought with me. 12 hours left. Time to prepare for a negotiation I had no intention of accepting. The council's building looked like it belonged in a museum. Stone facade, arched windows, carved symbols above the entrance that predated modern dimensional theory by at least a century. Some of those symbols were still functionally relevant. Others were decorative misunderstandings of principles their creators hadn't fully grasped. I arrived 15 minutes early and spent that time examining the building's structure. The stonework itself had been treated with something that dampened certain frequencies. Clever. Made it harder to perform workings inside without their knowledge. The windows were modern despite their antique appearance, layered with materials that would detect dimensional fluctuations. They'd turned the entire building into a monitoring apparatus. Chen met me at the entrance. Professional smile, but her eyes were calculating. "Thank you for coming. The council is eager to meet you." "I'm sure they are." She led me through hallways lined with portraits of previous council members. All of them looked stern and certain, the kind of certainty that comes from never questioning your foundational assumptions. We passed offices where practitioners worked at desks, filing reports, processing applications, the bureaucracy of dimensional management. The council chamber was circular with 7 seats arranged in a semicircle. 5 were occupied. The members ranged from a woman who looked barely 30 to a man who had to be pushing 80. Chen took her seat, making 6. Mr. Webb, the eldest member spoke first. I'm Councillor Thorne. Thank you for accepting our invitation. You made it sound like refusing would be unwise. We prefer cooperation to enforcement, but we're prepared for either. He gestured to the empty seat facing them. Please sit. We have much to discuss. I remained standing. Small thing, but it established I wasn't accepting their authority structure. Thorne's expression didn't change, but the woman to his left, Councillor Reeves, leaned forward slightly. We've reviewed the report from your incident, the unauthorised working, the dimensional breach. Your methodology was impressive, I'll grant you that, but it was also dangerous. It was necessary. Your standardised containment protocols would have left that rift partially open. That's not accurate, another member said, younger, maybe 40. His nameplate read, Councillor Drake. Our protocols are designed to stabilise dimensional boundaries, not seal them completely. Complete sealing often causes more problems than it solves. Because your techniques aren't precise enough to seal without creating stress fractures. The room temperature seemed to drop. Reeves sat back in her chair. That's quite an accusation. It's an observation. Your methods prioritise consistency over effectiveness, which is fine for managing known threats, less useful when something unusual appears. Thorne raised a hand before Drake could respond. Let's set aside methodology for a moment. Mr. Webb, do you understand why the compact exists? You maintain stability through standardization, prevent reckless experimentation, manage dimensional practitioners to minimize risk to the general population. Correct. And do you know what happened before we existed? I knew the history. Everyone did. The Cascade event, 30 years ago. Multiple dimensional breaches across the city. Reality became unstable. Took 6 months to fully contain. It killed 1,700 people, Thorne said quietly. And it started because one brilliant practitioner thought he'd discovered something revolutionary. Something that made standard techniques obsolete. He was right about one thing. His method was revolutionary, but he didn't understand the secondary effects, the cascading failures. By the time we realized what was happening, the damage was irreversible. He pulled up a holographic display. Images of the affected areas, buildings that had partially phased out of reality, people caught in dimensional flux, their forms twisted by exposure to incompatible physics. The cleanup had taken years. That practitioner was my brother, Thorne continued. Marcus Thorne. The compact was formed from the emergency response team that contained his mistake. We don't maintain these protocols out of bureaucratic preference. We maintain them because we've seen what happens without them. The room was silent. Chen wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry for your loss, I said finally. But your brother's failure doesn't validate your methods. It just proves his approach was flawed. Every approach is flawed until proven otherwise, Reeves said. That's why we require testing, peer review, gradual implementation. You may have sealed that rift successfully, but you have no idea what secondary effects you've created. What stresses you've introduced into the dimensional fabric. We won't know for weeks, possibly months. She had a point. I'd been monitoring the site, but long-term effects were impossible to predict immediately. Drake leaned forward. We're not asking you to stop practicing. We're asking you to work within our framework. Submit your techniques for review. Let us help you test them safely. If your methods are genuinely superior, we want to know that, but we need verification. How long does your review process take? Depends on the complexity. Standard workings, a few weeks. Novel approaches, several months to a year. And during that time, I'm not authorized to use them. Correct. I looked at each council member in turn. They believed what they were saying. They'd built this system from tragedy and maintained it with genuine conviction that it prevented worse disasters. They probably had prevented disasters. But they'd also created a structure that prioritized caution over innovation to the point where progress became nearly impossible. "I appreciate what you're trying to do," I said. "I understand why you think it's necessary, but I can't work within your timeline. The next dimensional anomaly won't wait for committee approval." "Then you're refusing to register?" Thorne's voice was heavy. "I'm declining to submit to your authority. There's a difference." Reeves stood. "Mr. Webb, if you continue to practice without authorization, we will have no choice but to treat you as a rogue operator. That means active monitoring, intervention if necessary, possible legal action." "I understand." "Do you?" Drake's voice had an edge now. "Because rogue operator isn't just a classification. It's a threat assessment. We have protocols for dealing with threats." The temperature in the room definitely dropped this time. Not metaphorically. Someone had just activated a suppression field, the kind that made complex dimensional work nearly impossible. Chen stood slowly. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I'd prepared for this possibility. The suppression field affected standard techniques, but I'd spent the last 12 hours developing something different. A working that operated on principles their monitoring wouldn't recognize immediately. "I'm going to leave. Now," I said. "You're welcome to try stopping me." Thorne raised his hand again, and the suppression field intensified. "We don't want confrontation, but we will protect this city." "So will I, just not your way." The working I'd prepared wasn't dramatic. No light show, no reality distortion. Just a careful manipulation of the dimensional membrane between where I was and where I needed to be. The suppression field didn't recognize it as a working until I was already gone. I materialized 3 blocks away in one of Marcus's low interference zones. My phone buzzed immediately. Unknown number. That was unwise. Not Chen's voice. Younger, urgent. "Who is this?" "Someone who thinks maybe you're right. Meet me at the coffee shop. 1 hour. Come alone." The line went dead. Things were about to get complicated. I stared at the phone for 30 seconds before pocketing it. Someone on the inside disagreed with the council's approach. Could be a trap. Could be legitimate dissent. Either way, I was already committed to this path. The coffee shop was crowded when I arrived. Lunch rush? Good for concealment, bad for detecting surveillance. I ordered black coffee and found a corner table with clear sightlines to both exits. She arrived exactly on time. Mid-20s, dressed like any other tech worker in the city. But she moved with the kind of precision that suggested extensive training. She sat without asking. "I'm Sarah, junior practitioner, 3rd year with the Compact." She kept her voice low. "What you did in that council chamber, 5 other practitioners felt it. None of us could identify the technique. That was the point. Councillor Drake thinks you're dangerous. Reeves thinks you're arrogant. But Thorne..." She leaned closer. "Thorne thinks you might be what his brother was trying to become. Before the Cascade. And what do you think?" "I think the Compact is so afraid of another Cascade that they've stopped looking for actual solutions. We manage threats now. We don't solve them. Every dimensional anomaly we encounter gets stabilized and monitored. Never sealed, never truly resolved." She pulled out a tablet, showed me incident reports. Dozens of them. Rifts that had been contained for years, some for decades, each one requiring constant maintenance, regular monitoring, permanent resource allocation. "This is what our system produces," she said. "Sustainability through perpetual management. It works, but it's not elegant, and it's definitely not efficient." I thought about the rift I'd sealed. Gone completely. No monitoring required, no resource drain. "The council won't change their approach," I said. "No, but some of us are tired of maintaining problems instead of solving them." She slid a data chip across the table. Locations of every active containment site in the Pacific Northwest, dimensional signatures, maintenance schedules, everything. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because if you can actually seal rifts permanently, we need to know that. And because the Compact won't let you prove it through official channels." She stood. They'll be monitoring you constantly now, waiting for you to make a mistake they can use as justification for intervention. Be careful. She left before I could respond. I spent the rest of the day analysing the data. 17 active containment sites in Seattle alone, each one a dimensional wound that had been bandaged but never healed, each one requiring practitioners to maintain the bandages indefinitely. The inefficiency was staggering, but more than that, it was dangerous. Every managed rift was a potential point of failure. If the Compact ever lost the resources to maintain them, if their practitioners were pulled away to deal with a larger crisis, any one of these sites could cascade into something catastrophic. They'd built a system that required them to be perfect forever. My phone buzzed. Marcus. You need to see this. The EM patterns around 3 of those locations just spiked simultaneously. Something's affecting all of them at once. I pulled up his data. He was right. The signatures were changing in sync. Not naturally. Someone was manipulating them deliberately. Can you trace the source? Working on it. But Marcus, whatever's doing this has access to infrastructure controls I didn't think were networked. This isn't just someone casting spells. This is someone who understands the city's systems. The Compact. Testing me. Seeing how I'd respond to a coordinated crisis. Or maybe not testing. Maybe this was their enforcement protocol. Create a situation that would force me to either stand aside and watch their managed rifts fail, or intervene in a way that would give them justification for direct action. Either way, I was out of time for preparation. The first site was closest. Industrial district, old warehouse that had partially phased during the cascade and never fully returned. The Compact had stabilized it, but the building existed in a state of permanent dimensional flux. Touch the wrong wall and your hand might end up in a reality where that wall never existed. I arrived to find the stabilization field failing. Not gradually, catastrophically. Chen was already there with a response team. She saw me and her expression hardened. You need to leave. Now. You know I won't. Then stay out of our way. Her team was working frantically, reinforcing the containment protocols, trying to hold the building in phase. Standard techniques executed with precision. It wasn't working. Whatever was causing the interference had been designed specifically to counter their methods. I could see the problem immediately. They were treating the building like it needed to be pulled back into our reality. But it didn't want to be here. The dimensional stress had given it momentum towards somewhere else. Fighting that momentum required constant energy input. What if you worked with the momentum instead? I started a working before Chen could object. Not a containment field, a controlled release. Let the building slide into whichever dimension it was trying to reach, but shape the transition so it didn't tear a hole in reality on the way through. What are you doing? Chen's voice was sharp. Solving the problem instead of managing it. The building shuddered. Then smoothly, it began to fade. Not explosively, not catastrophically. Just a gentle transition from one state to another. In 30 seconds, it was gone. The space where it had been was empty, stable, completely normal. Chen stared at the empty lot. That's not possible. The dimensional stress should have caused a cascading failure. Only if you try to force it back. If you let it go where it wants to go while controlling the transition, there's no stress, no cascade. Her expression cycled through disbelief, understanding, and something that might have been anger. You just violated about 15 different protocols. I also solved a problem that's been draining your resources for 30 years. The other 2 sites were similar. Different specifics, same underlying issue. The Compact's containment methods worked, but they were fighting against dimensional momentum instead of working with it. Once I understood that, the solutions were obvious. By the time I finished the 3rd site, Chen had called in Councillor Thorne. He arrived with Drake and 4 enforcement specialists, the kind of practitioners who didn't do research or maintenance. They handled threats. Mr. Webb, Thorne's voice was controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. You've just dismantled 3 decades of careful containment work. I have sealed 3 rifts that you were managing indefinitely. The sites are stable now, permanently. You're welcome. Drake stepped forward. You don't understand what you've done. Those buildings, those dimensional anomalies, they were equilibrium points. Stable because we made them stable. You've destroyed that stability. I've eliminated the need for stability maintenance, which frees up your practitioners for actual work instead of permanent bandaging. You've created unknown secondary effects that could manifest anywhere, anytime. Thorn was struggling to maintain composure. This is exactly what my brother did. Brilliant short-term solution with catastrophic long-term consequences we won't see until it's too late. He might have been right. I'd acted quickly, maybe too quickly. But I'd also been right about one thing. Their methods were inefficient. And in a crisis, inefficiency got people killed. Monitor the sites, I said. If I've caused problems, I'll help fix them. But I think you'll find they're actually stable now. Not managed, stable. One of the enforcement specialists moved toward me. Thorn held up a hand. Let him go for now. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. But, Mr. Webb, understand this. You've just proven you're both brilliant and reckless. That combination is exactly what led to the cascade. We will be watching. And if you cause another disaster, we will stop you permanently. I left before anyone could change their mind. Sarah called an hour later. You actually did it. Sealed 3 sites. The council is losing their minds. I noticed. Some of us think it's incredible. Others think you're about to kill us all. A pause. I'm not sure which group is right. Neither am I. That was 2 days ago. The sites remain stable, no secondary effects so far. The Compact is monitoring everything I do with an intensity that would be flattering if it weren't so threatening. And I've discovered something interesting about the book that started all this. It has more pages than it did before. Chapter 13 appeared yesterday. Advanced Reality Manipulation and the Ethics of Permanent Change. Like someone knew exactly what I'd done and wanted to provide the next lesson. I'm not sure if I'm being educated or tested, maybe both, but I am sure of one thing. Magic is real. It follows rules, and like any system, those rules can be understood, optimized, and improved. The Compact built their structure from tragedy and maintained it with caution. That's admirable. It's also insufficient. Reality needs more than careful management. It needs people willing to find better solutions even when those solutions challenge established wisdom. Even when the risks are significant. I'm going to keep working, keep learning, keep pushing the boundaries of what their protocols say is possible. And maybe, eventually, I'll prove that innovation and safety aren't mutually exclusive. Or maybe I'll cause another cascade and prove Thorn right. Either way, I'm done being careful.